years, or let's see, let me start this way. How many of you been in 5 years? Hold up your hands, been in 5 years, all right. Keep your hand up if you've been in 10 years. Keep your hand up if you've been in 15 years, 20 years. So you kind of get an idea that these are important aspects of what what you're doing, so that you're here, you've made an investment, and you understand that this is a place to be. So Scott, you want to talk a little bit about, we got kind of a perspective. I told someone earlier, I've been blessed with a good memory, so sometimes that can be mistaken for knowledge. So a little bit later on, I'll talk about some of those things that I have memories of. But now let Scott talk a little bit about trends in the industry and what he sees coming up.
Thanks, Leroy. So Leroy and I and another gentleman, Brian Oswald, who unfortunately got double tasked today and couldn't be a speaker, we had the great opportunity to try to put together a collaborative, like a thought collaborative for you folks, around what we believe are the trends that are going to affect us in the coming years. Okay? So the program that we built is while some may say, hey, this is, you guys are thinking more like Star Trek and you're getting too far out there and things like that. The reality is, and we'll talk about this today, is that there are real tangible opportunities because of advances in technology for an integrator in the large building space like we've never seen before. When Jim Young, recalibrate the name of the conference here in terms of, let's reposition ourselves as an industry to take advantage of these opportunities. The building has changed. The people within it have changed. The mechanical electrical industry has not yet changed, okay? Now, some people think of that as a challenge. I think it's an opportunity, right? And people in buildings matter, okay? We have to start realizing that we are not just serving purchasing, maintenance managers, people like that. We are serving people who occupy the buildings that we put the systems in. And we have to consider ourselves an important part of their day. And we have to start thinking about that and developing systems that support that. And with that, like I say, I think there are just endless opportunities for all the integrators out there for the next decades to come. So I'm not going to talk about all the trends because we got all these panels coming up to talk about them. So you guys don't want to hear it from me. Let's hear it from the experts. Are we ready to kick off the first one?
Let me
one more? Leroy wants to make one more comment.
Yeah, I want to talk about that memory thing I talked about. So the one thing I'll say is I began my journey in this industry 1978. 1978, primary building controls were electric and pneumatic. And so we were running tubing and we were running wiring and we were doing a lot of hardwired relay logic and we were doing a lot of different things. My background was computer science, and so consequently that's the reason why I got into what I thought was going to be an automation industry. When I first got in, little did I realize it would take about 10 or 12 years for the vision of what became DDC control to actually be realized. But here's the thing to think about. It was talked about much longer than it really happened. So we're hearing a lot of hype about AI, about IoT, and about fault detection diagnostics and building analytics and data analytics. We're hearing a lot about that, and sometimes it kind of becomes like a ringing in your ear. But the reality of it is, just like with DDC control, literally it was overnight that the industry changed. The industry changed. No new building was built without direct digital controls. No new building. That was a upheaval of an industry. So consequently, stay the course. The theme of this conference is recalibrate. Recalibrate your mind. Take in what we have. We have some great vendors in the exhibit hall. You got some great peers here. This is a community that we started 8 years ago, and it's grown. I'm really humbled by the number of folks that have chosen to spend this next 8 hours, no, the next 4 hours here with these sessions. I think we've got some great panelists. So anyway, thank you all for being here. So let's kick off.
All right. So one of the topics that is near and dear to my heart is the Master Systems Integrator. And for those of you who are new to the term, it's I mean, it is not really, I would say, I want to say it's been around a while, but it hasn't. But what it talks to is as the buildings, the digital systems that get digitized, we need oftentimes to bring those digital systems together, but they're different data formats, they're different systems, right? So, and those systems could be multiple BAS systems, or they could be like life safety, security, elevators, HVAC. At the end of the day, they're dissimilar data systems that need to be brought together by special people who have special skills. And when they bring the data together, they bring great value to the end users. And where we see them being utilized by end users properly, you'll find that end user never lets that contractor go because of the value they bring, because of how important data is in terms of what they do with it and how they deliver it. And so with that, Leroy, Brian, and I, we're fortunate enough to have probably some of the best MSIs in the world within our grasp, and all of them decided to come and attend and help us talk about this subject. So we're going to bring up our moderator first, Steve Evans. Come on up, Steve. And then if the group could also come up, Jason Hoke, Mark Peacock, Phil Rogers, and Donnie Walker. Oh, there's Donnie. Come on up, guys. Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Evans. I'm with CBRE. Any order's fine, guys. We know each other. Here you go. As I reflect on my own 30-year journey in the BAS industry, I can recall landmarks like the excitement of going from 9600 baud modem to 28K kilobaud modems. I can recall the blazing speed of 2 megabyte ArcNet building networks, the long days and nights. The first time I used BACnet protocols to integrate platforms from different vendors, and the laughably bad UI I cobbled together using HTML for the first time. Point is, as an industry, we as organizations and individuals have had to evolve to remain competitive, and change, new skills, doesn't come easily. Determining the correct strategy for growth and new offerings can be the biggest hurdle. From today's perspective, my examples may seem quaint, and as today's challenges are numerous and increasing in complexity. For example, the convergence of OT and IT networks have increased the threats, consequences of inadequate cybersecurity practices. Therefore, the elevation of MSI skill sets are critical to support the increasingly more powerful and complex installations that we are doing. Today, we have a panel of folks that have successfully navigated these increasingly turbulent waters and are willing to share their insights with us today. So, starting directly next to me is Jason Hoke from EntroSim. Then we have Mark Peacock from LinkSpring, Phil Rogers from El Brillo Energy, and Donnie Walker from Newcomb and Boyd. So Jason, first question, what defines a Master Systems Integrator? What skill sets did you acquire to deliver these enhanced services to your customers?
Well, defining an MSI or Master Systems Integrator, loaded question, right? What's the project kind of thing is kind of where it starts. But the easiest way I think I've ever heard it described is an MSI is a technology partner, right? You can label us as whatever you want, but at the end of the day, we have to look at integrating a bunch of different technologies into a single pane or onto a converged network. And that MSI needs to be well versed in all the technologies, facility technologies, whether it's software, OT software, or hardware. And it's in IT department, it's software development, it's a lot of things. I think Scott uses the analogy, it's a building ninja. Well, it is, because you can't be locked into one way of doing things. You have to flow with your customer needs and flow with where technologies are going, and always be on the horizons for looking at where technologies are going, because if you sit in this rut or in this valley of just, this is what we do and this is what we only do, and we do that well, and we just rinse and repeat, I think you lose what a true MSI is, because you have to be able to adapt and move with technologies quickly, because IoT technologies are coming out quicker and faster every day, and cybersecurity is a big thing. If you're not on your toes adapting and moving, then I don't think you're an MSI. But.
Great point. Anybody like to add to those comments?
Yeah, I think part of that is also staying ahead of the curve as new technology is coming out, and being prepared and ready to integrate those things before you're being asked to on a project. So kind of, doing the research and development and bringing that into your arsenal to be able to help your clients that are ultimately looking to deploy new technology and saying, hey, how's this going to work with what you guys are doing?
And I think, just to clarify, I'm from the OEM side, and my career has been helping to bring new MSIs or new SIs into the fold, especially in and around technology. So in addition to the technology that you guys have just talked about, I also think there's two other drivers right now, especially to become a master system integrator. One is the changing behavior of the building owners and the operators and what they are looking to achieve with respect to their business outcomes. Such as 5 years ago, we could be up on this panel, we would not be talking about the occupant experience like we do today, as a good example, or cybersecurity, or privacy, and so forth and so on. And then the second is that the world of accountability now has entered the master system integrator world, or the integrator world. They want folks who will be accountable, not it's not me, let's call the electrician. No, it's not me, let's call this person, and so forth and so on. So the building owners and operators are looking for that close sphere of accountability.
And somebody to bridge the gaps, not to create new gaps.
Correct.
And I think that's why it's that partner, right? The technology partner on that side, because if you're not a partner and you're a siloed piece of the puzzle, then that siloed piece of the puzzle isn't partnering with the lighting company and partnering with the HVAC controls and elevators and lighting and metering and people counting, room booking, and so you have to be that partner to play nice in that field and know not everything about every one of those technologies, but know enough when to ask questions, when to sit there and listen, and to drive to the conclusions.
So Donnie, as a specifying engineer, how can you create an environment where there is a point of accountability, where the building owners can go and rely on somebody to solve the issues, regardless if it was directly in their scope of work or sometimes slightly outside of it?
Yeah, I think from the specifying and design community, the first start is embracing the Division 25 model and really understanding what the role of the Master Systems Integrator is and understanding what the needs of the project are. But like in our case, we developed a group that specialized in building systems and integration to be able to directly specify that part of the work. But I think for the typical mechanical design industry is slowly evolving, as well as the contracting community. And so I think a lot of the design teams need to really address that requirement head on, and either have the design teams develop that specialty so that they really understand all of those different points of integration, or you look at it as another team member that needs to be added to the team that has that specialization, because what we had in the past of siloed systems designed and then some spec language that says integrate, that just doesn't work anymore, because there's who has ownership of that system, who's providing it, what data points are needed to be pulled into the system, or data points from different systems being used in the sequence of operations to drive other systems, and all of that complexity has to be worked out in the design, because ultimately that's where the finger pointing came from, is that it wasn't defined clearly for anyone, so the easiest thing to do is exclude it.
So to Jason, have you seen improvements in the environment, in specifications at Comm your way as an MSI so that you can be more successful and deliver to the expectations of your customers?
Yes, in two different scenarios, right? Because the Division 25 can go out as a kind of bid spec package with a project, or in some cases I've seen where it's a pre-qualification. So there's two answers to that. In a pre-qualification where the MSI is brought on as a partner, great success and great feedback, because then becomes part of the team with giving feedback on maybe it's design or how systems are going to communicate with each other, kind of thing like that. But when it's a strictly portion of the bid spec package where it is just a commodity, it's not creating that partnership, and a Master Systems Integrator can't, I feel it cannot be a commodity, because there's too much value to the owner in that MSI, representing them, making sure that the lighting system is deployed properly and proper data points are made available, and working with elevators. And if they're not a partner and looked at as a commodity, they can't act in that way.
So Phil, if you look back at the recent past, what are some challenges that you've seen where MSIs have successfully addressed and evolved in the role of as the role of the MSI continues to evolve?
Okay, thanks, Steve. So there was a question about system integrators in the room. Show of hands again. Okay, so for a few minutes I'm going to be addressing you that raised a hand. We started everyone uses the word journey. It was a journey for us as well. We knew we loved smart buildings. We knew we loved energy efficiency. This issue about becoming a MSI, Master Systems Integration, in 2017 became more of a reality. And this is what we did about chasing this. One is we knew we had to have boots on the ground on a number of cities, so we went through a period of trying to acquire and grow geographically. That was an important element for us. We knew we had to have the inspiration, and it's not hard to be inspired by this concept about MSI, because it's a sea change in the industry. I was, for the first 20 years, someone that you would call on. I was the landlord or the operator, and knowing what this could really mean to these buildings is mind-boggling. So in 17, we did what we normally do for our clients. We did an internal gap assessment on ourselves. 67 pages later, hundreds of interviews, internally, externally, addressing the external environment, what the market was going to offer. We ended up with agreeing on 11 of many elements that we wanted to really focus on. And the 11 elements that we ended up deciding that we had either the right skills today, or we had to acquire or buy or hire those skills. And here are the 11. By the way, this morning, the other Phil forgot his 5th C, so I didn't want to forget my 11 elements here. So cloud development was first on the list. The idea of having people that could actually sell this in a complex area. We have 36 sales executives. We found out only 3 could sell this. 36 professionals, very talented in systems integration, very talented in selling what we were doing. Only 3 made the list.
Phil, what were some of those barriers? Why only 3 out of all?
IT, intimate knowledge. We had a lot of things going for us. We had all the systems out there we had good knowledge with: Allerton, ALC, JCI, Siemens, Tritium, etc. We had very good knowledge there. We knew about buildings, plants, we knew about lighting controls. That should have been a given for us, that we could step up, but we found out that we were weak on this whole area of connecting the IT network and the systems integration, and also the role of a quarterback, because this is You're oftentimes as a system integrator, you think you're the quarterback, you're just going down the spec. But this is truly the technology FM manager of the facility. So data science, integrated sequence development, FDD, project management, another thing, project management. We have 47 PMs that works for Burial. 4 of them made the cut when we came back, and that surprised me, but the more that I've networked and talked to many people in this room, it shouldn't have surprised me. It takes a different level of PM talent for these installations. I see Jay's, and he's agreeing with me. Customer use cases, enterprise networking, software development, and digital twin. We picked these 11 elements, and as I said, we were not at a starting point with all of them. Some we were very mature in, others we weren't. So this became our strategic roadmap over the last couple of years to get there on these cases. It typically always evolves around leadership and hiring the right people. So for those who are going down this journey, do not look at this as from a business standpoint. I'm talking about the business aspect of this now. Don't look at this as a simple ROI. We went to our board at the end of this gap analysis, and we had to present to the board our needs, our vision, our own inspiration. And one of the board members wanted the ROI, and I shut him down and said, unfortunately, in this particular case, this is what Surrey was and then Alexa became. They didn't think, there was an ROI back then. They were just seeing there was a need out there. And you could relate to other references like this. So fortunately, we had a good board, supporting board, go for it. And that's where we're at today. But it's definitely a journey, a lot more to learn from our standpoint. And this is one of those areas that we've had thousands and thousands and thousands of man hours behind the scenes. So if you're a business guy in here and you want to know a little bit more, you can see me after this talk.
That's a great journey you shared with us. I think as we all struggle to grow and evolve our businesses, hearing that how you started and how you got to a better place is really inspiring, so thanks for that. When you were looking to affect change, what percentage was applied to evolving your current staff, and what percentage or what use cases were you bringing in fresh perspectives from the outside?
So, a great question. One of the very, very early steps of this gap analysis was doing our own internal survey. At the time, we had 350 employees, is that right, at the time? We found out we had about 20 people that were like super excited and could help us on this MSI journey, and that's it. So the answer is that we knew we had a lot of work internally to do. So we ended up putting our head of strategy to be basically our internal cheerleader for the next 18 months, building the need, building the inspiration, building the learning curve internally, because you can't sell externally if you don't sell internally. That was our process.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, that internal visioning is a good point, because you can always show a higher ROI around just continuing to do what you've always done until your industry blockbusters you and it passes you by. And so if you're not doing that pre-game visioning and going and taking your company where you want it to go, then you can end up missing that next wave of where you should be.
Exactly.
And the ROI over time has continually evolved and changed. And I don't know, from this audience out here and my colleagues on the floor here, while it's changing, we're getting hit for return on investment or outcomes that we probably never thought of 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And every day when I talk to building owners and operators, they're throwing brand new things at us all the time, which makes perfectly good business sense. But then you're scratching your head. All right, that makes sense. Yes, we can connect, we can get the data, we can do all the analytics and all of that, which gives us a good foundation. But just be prepared that stuff is going to come at you out of left field. And be prepared to be able to try to figure that out.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just yesterday, I had a conversation with an owner, and the owner said, I want my people to be able to find a quiet spot to work from an app. I was like, cool, all right, let's do it. So now we have to figure out the technology to find quiet spaces and give them an app and give them the ability to search by sound levels within the space, and if that's available.
It's called Starbucks.
Right, minus the coffee grinders. Yeah, but totally. So it's being open to ideas like that, because if you're not, then you're just going to be. If you're not, you'd still be installing pneumatics, I guess, right?
So Mark, sleeping well these days?
I'm sleeping very well, thank you.
All right.
Sometimes.
Well, you know, a lot of MSIs aren't.
Yes.
So from somebody who is sleeping well to those who may not be, what used to keep you up at night, what are keeping others up at night, and how can you put some of those concerns to bed, so to speak?
Well, I think for this audience, there's 4 or 5, and like Phil, you know, I'm getting a little older, so I have to write things down, so, anyway, and I wish I had, Leroy's, 40-some years in this business, you still got your hair, I don't, so, you know, I'm very envious. So, first of all, I think is the domain knowledge requirements that are needed today and truly expected by building owners. You know, it was before that, you can make disparate systems talk to one another. Yeah, we can do that. You can connect. Yeah. But it's much more than that. It's about interoperability, data and analytics, the cyber, which we talked about. So again, it's having that breadth of knowledge of what is truly required. Another one is truly understanding the decision-making and how it is done today. It used to be, you go see John, the facility person, oh yeah, we've got all this, great, we'll sign up, we're moving on. That is completely changed, and I think this whole room can attest to that. Whether you gotta see the OT folks, you gotta see the IT folks, you gotta see the CFO, sometimes the CEO, and many times it's a committee that you have to deal with. So again, that's a factor as far as not, you know, keeping me up at night sometimes. As another one is key employees walking out the door. You invest a lot of time and effort in their training and their knowledge, and they decide to go elsewhere. This market is extremely competitive right now for good, qualified, experienced talent. Another one is, and I'll end with this one even though, well actually 2 more. Customers being poached, and I think we probably all of us in this room have experience where we think we're doing a really good job for a client and we're delivering on the business outcomes, we're delivering on what has been expected, and all of a sudden, hi Mark, sorry, but we've decided to go with somebody else. And then finally, what I believe is helping push this MSI movement forward is going to be, and it's already started, is a shift in the business model. And what I mean by that is we eventually will have opportunities where we have to offer what we do and what we deliver in a as-a-service model. No longer will be, well, let's buy these controllers, let's do this, let's do that, and whatever, and, well, how can I afford that when I got to worry about the CapEx expense if I'm a building owner? So look and start investigating shifts in the business model.
Phil asked a question, had everybody raise their hand if they're MSI or system integrator. Can we try that again? Because I want to ask another question of all those people. Okay, how many have ever gotten a contract and were asked before receiving the paperwork and everything, SOC 2 compliance and pen testing? Raised hands.
1 right there.
1, 2, 3, 4. 5. Separates the capabilities right there. If you have to do that, you know you're in the MSI realm. If you're not even thinking about that, or you're asking or Googling what is a pen test or SOC 2 compliance, that might be your answer.
Call Jason.
So we have some time for to take questions from the audience. Anybody have some thoughts on their mind? Sir?
Yes, I know Mr. Peacock was speaking about shifts in the business model. I was just asking, hoping you could elaborate more on what sort of shifts you're actually going to be expecting moving forward.
Well, again, let's look at what the owners, building owners and operators' expectations are today, and I think that's going to help dictate what these business models will going forward. As I said, this whole as a service, I think it's much easier for owners and operators to get things through their purchasing process as a service type model, because look at the IT world. They do that every single day. IT is delivered as a service model. OT should be the same way, or at least an option to be able to offer it that way. And again, it gets that building owner out of having to write a check immediately for several $100,000 of equipment and things like that. The second is, when I started in this, it was, again, all about connectivity and integration. That, to me, for today, is a given. It's all about the data, the analytics, and then driving value on the facility side, but more importantly, the business outcome for the business. How is it going to drive and help that business? So, one of the things, and I've told this story, many of you probably, and then I'll shut up. I traveled to Hong Kong several years ago, and I had the fortunate pleasure of going out with one of the big property owners. And we're driving around in his chauffeur rolls, and he's showing me, I own this building, and it was great. We pull up to 2 buildings, and he shows me these, and he says, what do you see? I counted the floors, all the same. I asked him some questions, what's inside? For the most part, same stuff as far as behind the closet. Are they tenant-owned, occupied, whatever? He gives me all that. He says, I just sold both of these. The one on the right got $5 million more than the one on the left. One reason, because it was smart. It was a smart building. Essentially, they had done it, and they were able to command greater asset value for that because of the technology and the business outcomes. So.
Mark, was that a multiplier above their investment? So did they?
Absolutely,
Okay.
Absolutely. And then he went on to say is from that day on, he made sure, I think he owned about 2,500 buildings. Every one was smart building enabled. Keep it like that.
Additional questions, sir?
Yeah, this question is for Donnie. In terms of how buildings have been built and constructed, things haven't changed from an owner perspective in terms of the tiers and the trades. How are you helping the customers think differently about how they're building their buildings in the future with such crossover around responsibilities that may be more difficult to silo as we would have in the past?
We're having to do a lot more early planning and working with the owners in an outcomes-based model. And so really having the dialogue of what their expectation is and what they're looking for, and then helping to coach them to how to get there. Because if you kind of start in the middle where you're designing along and someone gets an idea and says, we want this to be a smart building, a lot of times there have been those early decisions made already that prohibit you from getting to where you really need to get to. And it's not that there's a significant cost barrier in a smart building versus a more traditional building, but it's that once those wheels are in motion and the partners are at the table, it's very difficult to change that momentum. So we're really having to start in not even schematic design, but concept development and make those outcomes a part of that concept, and then make sure the systems that are engineered are working to achieve that and then that flowing through the entire process, because it is difficult in, in kind of the normal mode of our industry, as that momentum carries you towards doing what you've always done, difficult to make that shift midstream. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the engagement of IT up front. And so what is your IT model? Who is your IT? We were having a discussion with someone building a new corporate headquarters the other day, and talking about the things that are going to live on their OT network or their base building network. And that was a brand new term for them. And so, introducing that whole concept of, all of these network connected things are going to be in your building. Where do you want them? Do you want them sitting on your enterprise network? Probably not. So what's the solution going forward?
Follow-up. Donnie, a quick follow-up. So you talk about how you heard the owners. That's awesome. How do you heard the scopes of work? Where do you put, how do you break up the division between like the BAS and the Section 25 and the lighting control? Could you speak to that a little bit in terms of how you manage those scopes and put it together so the construction community can bid on it properly and things like that?
Sure. Yeah, we've got a couple of different things that we do in the process. So one is developing an architecture diagram that clearly defines all of the connected components in the building and whose responsibility that is. And that responsibility is for provision. Who's providing that system? That's the first key point. But then we have a responsibility matrix that goes with that defines for each one of those systems who else has responsibility, whether it's pulling in points of data, writing a sequence of operations, maybe in another system that's using that data. And so it's really looking at each data point within the design and tracking it from who provides it, who physically installs it, who connects it to the network, who takes that point into a system that's doing kind of your data normalization, and then who has the responsibility of the visualization and analytics. And maybe that's, the only role of the MSI, or maybe the MSI is a more broad-reaching role of providing some of those other systems, and then collaborating with the more traditional subcontractors that are providing the other systems. But if that's not spelled out completely all the way through the process, then you'll get a breakdown somewhere, because it won't be clear to someone that they had a responsibility that they did not provide.
Yep. Thank you.
Other questions? Sir?
Yeah, I have a question. Really, at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is understand the goals and objectives. It's an unstructured problem, so you need some kind of consulting strategy, some different approach, and maybe the traditional integrator contractor maybe does or doesn't have that skill set. But on top of that, the client has to be ready for something like that. How do you bridge the gap? And then secondly, where is that really going to come from? Would it be an MSI integrator, or would that come more from A&E firms, mechanical engineering, whatever?
I was thinking the same thing. Who's creating the need for MSIs?
I'll venture first. I think where I'm seeing a lot of it, not 100%, but definitely more than it used to be, is the building owner themselves and their staff. They are smarter than they ever have been before. Their staff and that type of thing is now more educated on smart building, whatever you want to call it, technology. And I think everything that we collectively have been doing for the last 15, 20 years as an industry finally is making the inroads that we had all hoped it would done 5 years ago. So to answer your question, I think a lot of it is being driven by the building owner and the operator. And then two, I'll give a part B on that, is if the integrator isn't taking the proactive approach, then they're going to go, you're a customer versus a client. And the customer is, thanks, I go in, I do your job, I leave, and we're done. Versus extending value and becoming a true business partner with that particular business owner, and then being able to extend reoccurring revenue. I mean, let's face it, none of us want to go in there and get a job and then leave. We want the reoccurring revenue. That's where the money is. That's where profit is reoccurring revenue.
Yeah, that owner driven decision is really starting at the benchmarking phase. And so for every corporate, higher ed, healthcare project that we're working on, the very first thing the owner is doing is they're going and visiting other first-class facilities, and then they come back to the design team and say, we went and saw this, this, and this. What are you going to deliver that, gives me those types of outcomes? And then, now that theirs is actually built and ours isn't even conceived yet, what are we gonna do that's better than what we just saw? And so there's really a lot of benchmarking going on as people are looking at, investing hundreds of millions of dollars in new facilities.
And I also think it's like the WeWork spaces, right? So the tenants are driving for more technology because they're having to compete against spaces like WeWork that have a lot of technology within them. So how do they now bring their workspace up to that level and up to that caliber within? So it's being driven by people within the facility as well.
Talent retention is a big deal. I think Nest in Surrey and Alexa and maybe you could even think of the Bose headphones and Beats that beat them. That's all part of the workplace today of the people that are being hired. And so from a retention standpoint, I know as developers, there's no question how much more profitable it is to retain a tenant. And part of that retaining that tenant is your building as smart as the next one, and so there's an ROI on that. So the workplace environment, the retention of tenants, the attraction of some of the best people. We see a huge demand in our pharma business right now in this area, and particularly on the Northeast and on Southern California right now, because the tenant going after that particular employee.
Leroy, you have a question?
Yeah, this is for Phil and Jason, and it kind of gets back to, we've got some people that are on various places in their timeline continuum as far as growing their integration business with the goal of becoming that Master Systems Integrator. And you talked about a diversity of talent that you have to have on board, and I'm sure that you've got within your organization subject matter experts in the various verticals that are required. But for the people that are just getting started, maybe they're in that 5th or 15th year, how much of the expertise did you partner? In other words, did you bring in a lighting or a sound or an experiential partner to work with you to develop that, or do you still use partnering for that level of expertise?
The 11 elements that we decided were the most important things to be a 5 on a scale 1 to 5. We went through that buy, make, partner decision on each one of them. And we first had a rate internally where we had 2 of the 5 or 4 of the 5 already. So when we went through that, and then you had to put a price tag on how much it was going to take to get there and how quick. So in some cases, we did hire to fill those. In other cases, we knew we had to partner as well. And for us, we're a buy and build company, so we're acquiring companies, and we're looking at that as an option too. It's always about how much capital you have, what's your time frame, and what's most important right now on the to-do list. And you have to look at that as an allocation. That was part of our strategic roadmap. And we have several phases of that too. So for those that are just beginning in the roadmap, best advice would be to get an MSI person in-house to help you go through this. It's very important. We could have made so many mistakes had we not stepped back and done this gap analysis and spent so much money, and probably wasted a couple years doing this had we not just stepped back and honestly looked at this with help. We had outside help through this process.
Could you explain that process just a little bit, please? The gap analysis that you did on your organization.
Yeah, so I was in 5 phases. And the first phase, simple as this was, what's MSI all about? What's the definition? How big's the market? What are the trends? Analysis. How's it going to be measured? What end markets are going to be more suitable? What part of the country is more suitable? We did all that research up front. Second phase was this internal analysis on what are the best elements that you want to go after. We did the internal survey of our own people to do a as-is situation, both, and also an external survey as well to give us a baseline. The third one was to come up with the strategic map, roadmap with this data. The fourth one is we wanted to figure out how this would be monetized. As I said, this is a business, so we had to sit back and said, you know, if we did this, this, and this, this was a monetization of this. And then the fifth one was the implementation phase. Those were the 5 phases.
Interesting. I think we have time for one more question. Sir?
Where do you see the role of the MSI in terms of the selection and implementation of the cybersecurity platform?
Yeah.
You go, I'll go.
Loaded question. I think the best thing an MSI can do is know where their limitations are. Because you might walk into a building or a building owner where deployment of the OT network and cybersecurity should be left to somebody that does networking and cybersecurity. You don't have to be everything to everyone and know your limitations, but I think they have to be aware of it and know how to harden the devices that they're connecting to and connect securely, whether that's API keys or what. Because it's not necessarily running a bunch of RS-45 networks out there, and understanding that there is risks with that and knowing where your risks are and how to mitigate those with the right partners and with the right solutions.
And your question was for the cybersecurity platform, so assuming that there is a cybersecurity platform. So, you know, there's many different cyber elements that need to be looked at. So there's, you know, device security, application security, and then the actual network security. And so, you know, each one of those has to be addressed individually, and the MSI, you know, needs to be able to speak to the device that they're deploying. What is that device security, and then working with whoever the manufacturer of the software is on the application security, and then the local network team for what the network security is, whether that's being, you know, deployed by an in-house IT group or a third-party network provider. So all of those have to be hit on throughout. But then there are actual, you know, platforms that are, you know, giving you the ability to see into the network and to monitor in real time the traffic and those types of things. And that's typically going to be outside the price range of a, you know, I want a network to run my building, but in a large enterprise that's looking at building out an OT that they manage, they may have that type of visibility into both the IT and the OT to really see everything that's going on.
And I could just, and I'll just add this, we look at it as it's a shared responsibility. It is the owner and operator to ask and demand, what are you going to be doing with respect to cybersecurity? It's obviously, as a manufacturer and a provider of technology, it's up to us to do things, as what we heard earlier today for those of you who were in the cybersecurity forum. And it's the MSI, or system integrator. To me, you should be proactive and have things that you want to put into your strategy, into what you are recommending them to do in order to accomplish this. At the end of the day, if you're not doing it proactively, it's going to come back to bite your customer, and it's going to come back to bite you in any way, shape, or form. So again, the technologies and the solutions out there, they're there. And to me, the MSIs, where you've got to come in is, it's why. You need to convince the customer why. Then you've got the various solutions, whatever is your choice.
It's a great concluding point. So a round of applause for the panel. Thank you for your time.